Welcome. Today we're digging into a really interesting Goldman Sachs report on PDD Holdings, the company behind those e-commerce giants Temu and Pinduoduo.
So, PDD's second quarter earnings for 2025 came in way, way better than anyone expected, and it definitely sent a ripple through the market. But the reasons why? Well, they're not what you'd think. All right, let's dive right in. So, first things first, what exactly caused all this buzz? It really all boils down to one key set of numbers that caught everyone off guard and kind of set the stage for this whole story.
Okay, so analysts were bracing for a pretty serious drop in profits. Goldman Sachs predicted a 38% decline in adjusted earnings. The wider market consensus wasn't much better, at about 33%. But then, PDD just shocked everyone, posting only a 21% decline. Now, yeah, it's still a drop, but it is so much better than anyone feared. And that's the surprise we're here to unpack. So, the really crucial question is, how did PDD pull this off? How did they beat expectations so easily? The answer isn't some massive surge in sales. No, instead it came from two very different and, honestly, pretty unexpected places.
And here's the first surprising twist. You'd think with competition being so fierce and right during China's huge 618 shopping festival, they'd be spending more, right? Nope. PDD actually pulled back on its marketing and sales budget, a really counterintuitive move. And we're not talking about a small change here. The pullback was significant. Marketing spend dropped from 33 billion RMB in the first quarter down to just 27 billion in the second. So why the sudden caution? Well, the Goldman report points to a couple of key things. Temu was scaling back its marketing in the US because of some tariff issues, and they also hit pause on a domestic trade-in program. The other huge piece of this puzzle came from a line item that, is usually a lot quieter, their financial returns. So this wasn't about selling more stuff. It was all about how well their investments performed. Just look at that jump. It's kind of wild. Investment income went from only 0.2 billion RMB in Q1 to a staggering 10 billion in Q2. Now, analysts aren't really seeing this as some new windfall. They actually think it's more of a normalization, basically things getting back to normal after an unusually low first quarter. But hey, whatever the reason, it made a huge impact on the bottom line. Okay, so we've got a profit beat that was driven by cutting spending and getting higher investment returns. But that raises a massive question. Is this sustainable? Let's take a look at what this all means for the bigger picture and the key debates that are now shaping PDD's future. Goldman Sachs kind of boils the future down to a few key battlegrounds. On the outside, it's all about Temu and whether it can handle changing tariff rules and new regulations in the US and Europe. Back at home, the focus is on fending off rivals like Douyin and growing its grocery service. And then financially, the big questions are, can they count on that investment income? And will PDD finally start giving more cash back to its shareholders? One key term that keeps popping up in all these debates is de minimis. This is a customs rule that is absolutely critical to Temu's whole business model. It lets them ship all those low-cost packages directly to people in places like the US without having to pay tariffs. As you can probably guess, this rule is under some intense scrutiny from regulators, and that poses a big, big question for Temu's future. But it's not just about these open questions. The report also flags several very specific risks that could, potentially derail the company's growth. Goldman's top risks here really paint a challenging picture. You've got market risks like weaker ad revenue and tougher competition. You've got geopolitical risks, especially over in Europe. And then you have these internal risks like heavy reinvestment squeezing profits. And this is a big one, a persistent lack of transparency that makes it pretty hard for anyone to see what's really going on under the hood. So after weighing the surprise results, all the future debates, and those potential risks, what's the final verdict from Goldman Sachs? Well, despite all the complexities and the challenges on the horizon, the analysts are actually staying positive. They are keeping their buy rating on the company's stock. And they've put a number on that optimism, a 12-month price target of $131. So basically, even with all the uncertainties we just talked about, they still believe the stock has room to grow over the next year. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. This last quarter's win, it was a story of smart financial management, right? Cutting costs, benefiting from investments. But the road ahead looks very different. The next chapter for PDD will probably be defined less by financial engineering and more by its raw ability to compete and win in what's becoming an increasingly tough and regulated global marketplace.